Flipside. I'm Daisy Obaisabon, your host on today's edition of the show. And you're going to meet my colleague right now. I have with me in the studio, Uyi Agumofwewe. We're not talking business. So for those who think it's business, sorry, it's not business. We're talking about the benefits of reading culture.
Right.
You know, recently there was this report about Nigerian youths not loving to work. They're very lazy. And we also know that laziness sometimes goes beyond physical and manual labor. There's also the mental laziness. So how would you grade an average Nigerian youth? Are we mentally lazy, or we really do love to read?
I wouldn't want to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come on television. Right? It's exciting.
You need help.
Yeah, I do. Okay, quite frankly, I wouldn't want to say categorically that we are mentally lazy. I just think most people, young people in particular, find books boring. Just the same way an average person will tell you news is too straight-jacketed, news is too formal, news is too serious. So they rather want to watch musicals and a few other things that are not too serious.
Yeah.
So when it comes to books, I think the real issue is most of us have not been cultured to love books. You look at 2-3 generations before a young person like myself, for instance, see how much of premium they placed on books and overall acquisition of knowledge. They could go to any length, they could have to go work, raise money to buy books to see themselves through school. You know, because the bigger picture ultimately is you want to not just only acquire knowledge, but you want to advance yourself and by extension advance society. But your question of are we mentally lazy or not? No, we are not, of course. It's just that we've not been cultured to love books. I'll give you an example. I mean, in the last 2 years, ask yourself, how many persons have you encountered who told you, say, in the middle of a conversation to say, I'll be going to the library? And then it raises the question of, do you actually have libraries? In the real sense of the word libraries. We're going to get to all that, hopefully, in the course of the discussion. Sure. But as for whether or not we're mentally lazy, no, we are not. We just don't love books. Okay.
Now, talking about libraries right now, have you ever used a public library?
I think I did once. I had to take my books there because my hopes were dashed as soon as I got in to realize that the books there were outdated. So the lesson I learned from that day on was to come with my books. So the only advantage I got going to that library was just to find a place that was tranquil enough for me to read. But if I was to go there to find materials, important, vital, updated materials, then libraries around here would be the wrong place to go to. That's not something to be proud of, by the way, but I think it's also a pointer to how much of attention we're supposed to be paying. I said we're supposed to be paying to libraries. Because I think we're talking from two sides of the mouth, as a government, as a people, as families, as institutions. Because when you say people should acquire knowledge, people should value education, it is not just a song. It's supposed to be a lifestyle. You're supposed to match words with action. So if government says, for instance, people should be educated, we're pursuing goals around education vigorously, and so on and so forth, it means that tangible, measurable, huge investment should be made in the area of education, especially where it has to do with reading, for example. So if you say people should go to library, which libraries are they going to? I mean, look at all the libraries around us. What has happened to all of them? I'm relatively young, but I know when I was in elementary school, for instance, there used to be some libraries. You could hear the grown-ups around you say they were going to the libraries, and most of them didn't go with books. In fact, they would go to get books, bring home, read, return after a week or two. And you could tell that there was a system as far as these libraries were concerned. But today, it's an entirely different song because the value of reading has been eroded over time. One time I listened to a veteran broadcast journalist on television in the course of an interview, and he asked a very salient question. That question came through to me and sat right in my head when he said, does the president read? You know, there was this pin drop silence. Because you can't give what you don't have. There's got to be exemplary leadership, whether you're the president or the governor. You've got to let people know that you love books. I mean, I give an example. Look at the US presidents. Just take your time and look at how many of them who have not authored books. When I mean books, I mean real books, not the kind of book someone writes in your honor. I'm talking about you authoring books. And by the way, President Barack Obama, the immediate past president of the US, wrote a few books before he left office, and those 2 books, for example, are going for over $1 billion in terms of rights now. The deal has been sealed already. We're talking value now. So for people who are asking questions like, was in a book, I mean, what does it change? As they would say, pidgin parlance, who book app and all that. The point we're making is that No society advances itself without, first of all, acquiring the necessary knowledge. I mean, Singapore is an example that readily comes to mind.
Okay. All right, we're going to give you the report on the World Book and Copyright Day. Yes, we're going to give you the report in a moment, but I have one more question for my colleague who is a bookie, before we get to that report. All right, the statement, when you want to hide a knowledge from a black man, you put it in the book. How credible is that statement? It's been on, I know I grew up hearing it, and my dad used to always say it to make me read, that people have this misconception, according to him, that black people, it's not really about Nigerians right now, do not love to read. So he says that and makes me go study, because he doesn't want me to be the typical African. He wants to prove a point that I am an African woman and I'm going to pursue education and I'm going to do well while pursuing it. But beyond my home, my dad is a teacher, my mother is a teacher, so books are just normal. We have a library. The statement that you hide knowledge from an African by putting it in a book, does it even, should it be something that people even say as of now?
Okay, I don't want to sit here and pretend like I'm very excellent at history, but I know I grew up to hear people say that again and again. Maybe it was the state of things at the point. But I also know for a fact, firsthand, that things have evolved over time. In fact, there's one research from around 2008, 2009, where some findings had claimed that a report that was carried out on corporate entities, corporate organizations in the US, showed that the bulk of the guys who worked there were the Caucasians, the real typical white people. Those were the guys who called the shots. They were the board guys, they were the CEOs, they were the tech guys, they were the ones who actually had a handle on the issues, who actually determined the direction of the companies. So that leaves you with the question of what exactly does the black man there do? Some person said they were the ones serving coffee, picking files from table to table, doing all of the menial jobs, the low-level jobs. I don't know how true that is, but I think over time things have evolved. I mean, look at even black actors, for instance. See how much of education they acquire. See the extent to which they go just to be able to raise their game, as it were. I mean, come back home to Nigeria, for instance. See how much people now love education. See how much people want to invest in education, because they've come to realize that you can't change certain things if you don't have the requisite knowledge. And the only way that happens is when you have the necessary information. So you've got to sit down and read. So to answer your question quite precisely, it's not correct for you to say if you want to hide something from a black man, put it in a book, because take it or leave it, you still have people in the western part of the world, in some of the most industrialized nations, who still do not read. And that's why, by the way, you still find a level of illiteracy in those countries. I mean, America is not completely literate, Switzerland is not completely literate, Japan is not completely literate. You still find people who need formal, basic education. But I think we want to also look inward and ask ourselves, can't we do better than we're doing right now? Because they say the biggest room in the world is the one for improvement, all right? So we can always improve. But again, you can't do that if you don't have the necessary, if you don't have the environment. I mean, look at schools that either don't have libraries at all, or they don't have up-to-date libraries. It's a shame. So it's a way of saying that government has failed, I mean, along this line. The people too have not actually risen up to the occasion. All right, because you see people, generations before us, they look at what is happening today as far as the reading culture is concerned, and they shake their heads. We know why they do that, obviously. I mean, look at reading clubs, for instance. We don't have reading clubs anymore. I mean, when I was growing up, it was a big deal. If you didn't join a reading club, it was as if you were disconnected.
Yeah, especially in secondary schools.
Exactly, you just had to join
you have Jet
reading
Club, you had NAFDA Club, you have all kinds of clubs.
And it gave you this huge, palpable sense of prestige. I remember, by the way, one time, my mom was working for a lady, and she was a big woman, as they say, right? So she bragged about me to her niece and her son. I mean, her daughter. I told them that I could read. And I was just in primary 3, third term, as it were, there. And then one day I show up, and the next thing they do is they give me a copy of Daily Times, and they take me straight to the center spread. I mean, for a primary 3 child to read, and they showed me an article there, and I was reading. They were amazed. I didn't know why they were amazed. I thought maybe I was fly to them. But I grew up to realize that what actually blew their mind was that I could read articles from a newspaper in primary 3, that kind of thing. But truth is, my mom had taken responsibility to do something very rigorous, teaching us how to read. I really didn't learn how to read because I was in a school. My mom made you read everything. Yeah. She made you read inscription on trucks, on buses. signboards of churches,
Products.
almost everything that was written in English. My mom made you read it. She would pick up a paper and say, read the back. What's this man's name? You would have to go through it. It was rigorous. It was painstaking, but today is worth it. I think that's what parents should be doing as well, because whether you like it or not, at some point in time, the government, society, and by society, we're talking about families, parents in particular, must take the responsibility to inculcate the reading culture. So the idea of when you want to hide something from a black man, put it in the book, for me, is a double-edged thing. On the one hand, whether it's true or not, it's subject to debate. But it should, more importantly, become basis for us to be challenged, to say, hey, come on, there's no better time to raise our agenda now.
Okay. And it's good to know that a lot of books are gone beyond just hard copy. We now have them in soft copy. So it makes it even easier for us in a world where everyone is so mobile. And I think a lot of black people are reading. And we have a lot of black authors too. They write books, and the books they write, we read them. We write them. We read them to write our WAEC, our NECO examinations in the university. So I think we are actually coming up, and we're getting there, definitely. And now we want to focus on parents. You know, it seems like we and I have got parents who made us read. And it's no news, it's no surprise that we're here, even in the broadcast station where book is like everything we do. We always want to read about everything. We need to know about everything. But now, parents, a lot of schools are everywhere. And in the morning, schools have resumed, by the way. In the morning, you have people running, driving, trying to get their kids to school for school run. But what are some of the things parents should be looking out for before they even pick a school for their children? After all, they have a part to play when it comes to reading, developing reading desires in their children. The school also seems to have a big, if not even a bigger role to play in that. So what should they be looking out for before you pick a school and say, this school is good enough for my child?
I think for a lot of parents, sadly, what they do is they look at for first proximity.
Uniform,
How
okay.
close is it to your house? Then the uniform. That's the brand ID. Yeah, they look at the brand ID. Then what else? They also look at the prestige that comes with it. You know, there's this sort of competition. My colleagues, my friends, my neighbors have children in that school. So if I don't send my children to that school, or a school that's at par, depending on what the standards or criteria for measurement will be, if I don't send my children to that school, it will look like I'm a poor person. Let me measure up. Let me show them I'm up to the occasion, and so on and so forth. But I think essentially what parents should look out for will be, first of all, the quality of the teachers, those who work there. I mean, they say you can't give what you don't have. You've got to have it to give it. So if the teachers there, for instance, can make a simple sentence, say a teacher who teaches English language, can't make a simple sentence, and they expect that your child will be excellent at the English language, ultimately, that would be unrealistic. So you've got to look at the quality of the teachers they have there. And that's the reason, by the way, when you watch schools put up adverts on radio and television, they always talk about the quality of their teachers. They say they have highly qualified teachers. Of course, again, that's subject to verification.
Sure.
But they know that it's a punch, it's a point, it's a big factor when it comes to quality of education. The manpower, the quality of the depth of their knowledge as far as the teaching sector, as it were, is concerned. So you need that. Then you also need to look at the facilities. You need to look at the labs. You need to look at the libraries. Not just the library. What exactly are the books they have there? What's the quality of those books? I mean,
how recent? You
can't be teaching me something in the 21st century, 2018, for instance. You're teaching me from a book that was written in 1974. I mean, that's some 4 decades behind us. So we've got to look at all of these factors. And parents have got to be intentional about how they send their children to school. I mean, I can't sit here and talk about parenting, but maybe I'm being futuristic about myself. Parents have got to be realistic about it. All of the money you're hustling to be able to send these children to school must count. And the only way to make it count is not just because you're spending it, it's because you're spending it on purpose. So look about the schools. Then another important thing is testimonial. What are other parents saying about the school? Not just because the school has rigged the process, not just because the school has influenced them to say that. What are other parents saying sincerely about the school? What's their impression? If they had to do it all over again, would they send their children and wards to that same school? You need to look at all of that. And then look at how does the choice of a school ultimately align with what or how you want your child to turn out is important. All right, because they say garbage in, garbage out for those who are in computer science. All right, so it's a factor in all of this. So parents must know that they owe their children some tremendous responsibility to ensure that they are not only sent to school, but they are sent to schools where quality education is guaranteed.
Okay. And now, there's also this thing that people say, especially in the churches. And an average counselor in church or pastor in church would always advise you to read up any Christian literature. Okay, you want to get married, church, they have a book written by several people that talks about marriage. Okay, you want to learn about leadership, oh, go to your church library, you find a lot of books on leadership, read it up. The church has books on business, they practically have books on everything.
Right.
So new churches, modern day churches have their church library. And the major reason they tell you to go there is you can get enough experience and knowledge about things from the book. You don't even need to experience certain things to know about them. So I'm wondering, which is a better teacher? Isn't it best you have an experience in something and it sticks, or to just believe what a book says? Because I don't want to trust everything books say.
I think trust is not the primary factor, Daisy. I've heard people say things like Nigerian schools are too theoretical. They should learn to
practical.
Exactly, inculcates deeper elements of practical, the practical elements into the whole system. Here's what I see about the whole thing. They go hand in hand. All right, it's like a combination. You've got to have the theoretical structure for you to be able to manage the practical process. I'll give you an instance. I met a guy at a commercial bank in 2008. In fact, he was the one who opened my account for me at that bank. And he told me he went to a school somewhere in the West. He came to this bank to serve. Ultimately, he got retained because he did very well. The management was impressed with him. They retained him. But he made a very incisive statement when he said that all the while he had been in school, he hadn't known how it would be or feel like to be on the floor of a bank, attending to customers, and doing the real banking work. All right? For some persons, they fly away with the last part. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you go to school or not. This is the real deal. But don't forget that whatever he is doing at that bank today, 1 decade down the line, it's on the basis of the theoretical structure he had acquired from school, all of the principles. All right, because take it or leave it, for instance, you can't come to the bank and be learning the principle of demand in economics. You've got to learn that in school, within the 4 walls of a school, whether it's a secondary school or a university. All right, so we must understand that all of these go together. Now, coming to the issue of experience, experience is great, but some things just have to be learned on the basis of acquisition of knowledge. Some things have to be learned first from books before you even get to experience them. So when you experience them, it's just like there's now a sort of consistency between whatever you had read up and what you're experiencing now. Incidentally, there's a truth. It will interest you to know we are now in a phase of our lives that some persons have come to refer to as knowledge economy. Some persons will just make livelihood, they will just make money, they will just have streams of income on the basis of the quality and relevance of knowledge that they have. They don't necessarily need to carry equipment. They don't necessarily need to be talking. They're just making a lot of money legitimately on account of the knowledge that they have. What it means is that knowledge is everything in a sense of the word. So when people argue, they come up with this argument of, let's talk about experience, forget about books. Just experience it. Of course, it's good. It's on point. But you can't divorce acquisition of knowledge from experience. And that's the reason, by the way, what people always put in books as authors are pieces of experience. All right, somebody writes a book and it says it's autobiography, and then you buy it. Somebody writes a book, it says it's about my life. It's a New York Times bestseller, for instance, and you buy it. The book is talking about the person's life, of course, the person's experience. You have not experienced it with that person. You weren't there when the person was going through that experience, but today you are reading the book. And now there's no way you read just one chapter of that book and tell me you've not learned something that can guide you at some point in your life.
Okay. All right, now talking about elections, they are coming fast approaching and people are having their campaigns without even going official about it, but we are having small campaigns on the internet and all sorts. I haven't grown to a point where, at least in my adult life, I've not seen any politician who campaigns and says, I'm going to rebuild the state library. I'm going to make sure there's a library in every local government, a public library. In fact, these libraries are coming with computers, so you don't only get hard copy books, you're going to get e-books, and I'm going to spend a certain amount on reading. Now, they just talk about education, sure, which eventually we do not see any special results. So should that be one of the things we should look out for as we're trying to get new leaders? Should they be talking about books and investing maybe in young authors or something like that? What do you think, personal opinion?
I think, I mean, while you were talking now, brilliant analysis, by the way. I was just thinking, I mean, you show up in front of a man's house and you say you want to marry his daughter. Then the man looks at you in the eye and says, what do you do for a living, young man? You say, I'm an author. It doesn't sit with him, really, in Nigeria. Let's not play hypocrisy about this. It doesn't sit with him because, I mean, you are not even...
If you're not a Wole Shinka,
you are not a Chimamanda, I mean, for the love of heaven, author of what? All right, so he wants to know. So until he has seen some remarkable things we have accomplished by way of being an author, and then you're likely not going to get a handshake as basic as that from him. The point is, in Nigeria, I mean, by the way, I'm talking here as a Nigerian, not just as a broadcaster who works for independent television and radio, because it affects every one of us. Politicians come and they say, we're going to invest XYZ, we're going to do 1, 2, 3 things about education. That's just too ambiguous. Be specific. What do you want to do about primary education, which should be compulsory in any case? What are you going to do about secondary education? Tertiary institutions, what are you going to do about them? What are you going to do differently from what we have seen in the last 10, 20, 30 years? We've got to look at all of this. You talked about libraries. I mean, libraries are being automated now. I don't need to, you use a library card for the love of heaven. So I don't just have to come and pick books off the shelf. It's a library card. I sit in front of a PC and I access over 50,000 books online. So all of the books you see on the shelf, all of the hard copy books, you have their equivalent on the computer. I just need access. I just need access credentials to get in there and read whatever book from any aspect of human endeavor. So that's what we should be looking at. So the question is, are we forward thinking about these things? Which of the countries are we looking at? Where are we learning from? But again, it shows that we are almost completely disconnected when it comes to innovation in terms of building libraries. First of all, not only are you having libraries that are dilapidating by the day, you don't even have this forward-thinking approach to say, hey, come on, let's sit down, think about ways to reinvent our libraries, reinvent the way people read. Write books. I mean, a few years ago, some persons were still complaining that most Nigerian academics didn't have their books in soft copies. I mean, even their papers, their works, and so on and so forth. Because there had been this deep-seated culture of you've got to carry it like this. You've got to carry it, hold it against your chest.
Even our religious books, the Bible, you have to hold a big
one. Let's automate the process. I mean, you can make people love book. Because take it or leave it, knowledge is life. Somebody wrote a book and titled it, Read for Your Life. I mean, that's no joke. That title of the book is a New York Times bestseller, Read for Your Life. It's not just saying read and get better. It's not just saying read and have sense. It's saying read for your life. This is somebody who's been there, done that. So as election year is upon us, we've got to have to take up politicians, the leaders, take them up on issues of education, not just education as we have known it to be in an ambiguous sense. Yes, education in terms of what exactly should happen. I mean, a few years ago, I attended a seminar, and one of the speakers there said, in Singapore, the goal is when your child completes primary education, he falls in love with the country. That's the goal. In other words, the idea is primary education in Singapore is designed in such a way that it's got to inculcate patriotism in your child. So if that doesn't happen at the end of 5 or 6 years, depending on what number of years you have to spend in primary school in that country, it means the goal has been defeated. So do we have such specific goals? What is my child supposed to be after primary school, after secondary school, after first degree? I mean, the way people see education here is meal ticket. So I go through the university, I graduate, I pick up my CV and whatever other things I want to add to it. I jump right into the labor market. I get a job. I start wearing tie if I get that kind of job that makes me wear tie. Otherwise, I just get a job that gives me enough money to get by. So it becomes a meal ticket. So we've got to see education beyond meal ticket. It should be something that refines our thoughts, the way we carry ourselves, the way we compete with other countries. I mean, we're told that your competitor is not the guy in Lagos or the guy in Abuja. The guy you're competing with is somewhere in Paris, somewhere in New York, somewhere in Tokyo, somewhere in Geneva. So if you don't have that level of knowledge that places you side by side that person, it means you're going to be here while that person is over here. So it means that we must continue to emphasize and place premium on acquisition of knowledge, and we've got to carry the leaders along. I mean, the leaders should be the ones carrying us along. But as it stands right now, given the peculiarity of our circumstances, we've got to carry the leaders along, put enough pressure on them to understand that education is what drives any developed country. It's not just politicking.
Sure. All right, now, and that will make some people out there listening to us wonder, how educated are our leaders to even step with? And we're still talking about leaders that come into power, and then someone is calling for their result that they went to one federal university or the state university, and the VC is saying they don't have any records of this person. Then eventually a record comes up, and there's just still too much controversies tied to the education of our leaders. So maybe that's why we see what we see today. But anyway, Bill Gates came to the country this year, 2018, and said the best resources anyone can have is human resources. It's not really about oil and gas. I think if we can build a society where the intellect is well respected, your intellectual capacity is appreciated, things will be better. And we have a lot of smarts right here in Nigeria. Just that if the society doesn't encourage your smartness, you channel it to something negative, Yahoo, and all sorts of internet fraud and other things. Well, the program is Flipside. We're talking about our reading culture. We're analyzing our reading culture in Nigeria as a whole, and that's in regards to the Book in Copyright Day that was celebrated some years back, and Nigeria joined the rest of the world to mark that day. The same Nigeria where we have very few libraries that are functional. But we'll go on a break quickly on the show. When we come back, it will be the concluding part of today's edition of Flipside. Don't go away, just stay tuned. We're looking at the World Book and Copyright Day in retrospect. It has passed, and we're just emphasizing on certain things that we've neglected for a long time. Our reading culture, it's so poor sometimes, and for a few people, it's really well built. They've developed themselves even to the point of reading at least one book in a month.
In a month, yeah.
I tried that.
Didn't work. You gave up in between.
I tried that last year. And the one good thing about it is that it made me have a lot of books, a lot of self-help books. So I told myself, I read a lot of novels, and I just said, Daisy, this year, 2017, you're not going to be reading any historical romance, you're not going to be reading any book on homicides, you're not going to be reading any medical, you're just going to read self-help books. You're going to get books on leadership, you're going to get books on speech, you're going to get books on anything and everything, even health. And I started. January, I got a book. I started with health. I got a book by Joyce Meyer, and she wrote this book on how she had some very terrible ailments, and she noticed it was the way the food she was eating that was even making her sick. She's over 60, and she still walks out to today. So it was a whole lot of motivation for me. I read that. In February, I got a book on success, and it was the title was Self-Discipline, No Excuse. I read it. That was a book by Brian. In March, I got a book called The Secret. I read the book. In April, I got the part 2 of that, The Secret. It's called The Magic. And in May, I got a book, Why Men Love. Okay, that's it's a word I can't use on TV.
I know what they love.
I got that book, and in June I got the part 2 of the book, Why Men Marry. I read that, and by July, it was so hard to continue. I got a book. I got a book on angels and demons. It was becoming a fantasy of mine. I really wanted to know more about it. It wasn't even on a religious reason. I started reading, but I got bored at some point, and that was just it. I stopped reading. But I still read. I read things. You can't be in media and not read. Sure. So I kept reading about a lot of other things, but it wasn't like I got a full book to develop myself. So I'm just going to ask you one last question before we go. Is there any advice you're going to give to us to keep us interested, especially when we set targets as regards books and reading, to keep us interested? Because I admire the way you read. Seriously, I do. Okay, any words? Any words?
Okay, a few weeks back, notable political economist, Professor Patutomi, said on television that in Nigeria, basically we give intellect a bad name. All right? The point is, the intellectuals will always carve a path to the future for most things. I mean, look at everywhere, every facet of human endeavor where so much of mark has been made. See the people who pioneered it, see the people who are still managing the process till today. They are intellectuals. Whether or not they actually acquired formal education is another discussion for another day. But the point is, they've been able to exercise their brain on account of the information they have. You talked about exercising, you talked about the fact that you picked motivation from somewhere to read, not just to read, but to buy books as well. It's because you got certain piece of information. So the big question now is, what information are you getting today? And what exactly will that information do for you in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead? It's important. So the point is, cultivate the discipline. You don't have to read, necessarily have to read voluminous books. You can start with pamphlets, start with articles. It's amazing how people want to read up gossip on Facebook and everywhere else.
Yeah, and
they're so stuck on Instagram. It's not a problem. But you see, life is a factor, it's a function of balance. Try to read up something, pick up an area, and just find a piece of information to change the way you think. As I said a while ago, reading and acquisition of knowledge overall should refine the way we think and the way we carry ourselves.
Thank you so much, Ree. It's been an amazing time right here on Flipside. It always is interesting when you come here because you learn about something. It's a social issue, sure, when we have a society where people do not read, or even people who are very intelligent and not respected. You want to compare the monies your professors earn in a month to the money a musician earns. Trust me, they are not mates. The prof is just a small boy where a whiskey is sitting or standing. Yeah, but when you want to talk about other things and you place them side by side, they open their mouth and they talk. You will know who to respect. You know who to doff your heart for. Education is very important, and it's really interesting when you have an idea about everything, and you can hold your ground on certain fields. If possible, every field. You don't have to be pro in that topic, but you must have at least an idea about it. I'm just using this medium to encourage all the youths out there. They said there's a statement that implied, it wasn't like it was verbally said that youths are lazy, but it implied that we are lazy people and we prefer handouts. Let us educate ourselves, build our minds, and prove to the world that an African youth is not dull. An African youth can really hold his own in the global community. And Daisy by segment, thank you so much for staying tuned. Get a book today and read something. Bye-bye.